life's too short. You've got to enjoy what you do, especially in this industry. And if you're not happy where you are, do something about it. I still feel today, after 30 years, incredibly lucky to have had an amazing career in the outdoor industry.
Hopefully a few more years left yet.
Constantly, everyone you work with, you just absorb their knowledge because they've all got different experiences. I think one of our core and strengths has been that ability to deal with the unexpected. We look for people who aren't kind of in a fixed mindset. That would be quite controversial.
In this episode of Sports and Outdoor Mentors, I chat with Matt Gowar, the Executive Chairman of Equip Outdoor Technologies, a business he founded more than 30 years ago that now owns and runs the outdoor brands RAB and Lowe Alpine. We talk about life as an entrepreneur, acquiring two iconic brands, and giving up his time to be president of the European Outdoor Group, plus much, much more. Before we begin the episode, I have one request. Less than 50% of people watching or listening now are subscribed. So please hit the subscribe or follow button so we can inspire and provide valuable insights to even more people. Thanks for your support and enjoy the episode.
Matt, back in 91, I founded Equip, and for 33 years, pretty much you were the CEO.
Yep.
And then last year, at the end of last year, you decided to step back a little bit into an executive chairman position. But I'm really interested to understand a little bit, what were the kind of key moments, if you like, through your life that actually brought you to where you are today and through that kind of journey of building a business?
Yeah, it's been an amazing 33 years. Hopefully a few more years left yet, but we'll see. So, it's been 2 or 3 milestones, I think, that were kind of a change to business and how it evolved. So, 91 is kind of when I look at it being the start. And so that's kind of when the business was originally set up as a sales agency for other brands in the UK. So, ironically, on my 20th birthday in 91, I started my first day as an agent, actually in South Wales. So my first day, don't completely quote me on this, but I seem to remember, or maybe I fondly remember it to be seeing Up and Under in Cardiff. It's my first call, and then going up to Gibbs Sport in Crickhowell, and then Crickhowell Adventure Gear. So that to me, that's kind of maybe what I now put out as my first day as an agent in Route 1. Kind of the next real milestone was autumn 93, when I have been, I guess, slightly persuaded or supported, let's say, by my customer base, and they were looking for gloves and accessories, and they felt that they couldn't get what they wanted. At that point, the glove and accessory market was dominated by Lowe Alpine, and there's a little bit of irony coming down later. And I wanted alternatives. So I had a contact, a new factory in China, got some gloves made, some samples made, took them out to see my customers alongside my own, selling the other items, brands I was selling as an agent. Got a load of orders. So autumn 93, we shipped our first batch of products, and there are still a few people in the trade that will remember it. It was all branded actually as Equip. So that was the kind of first milestone. And then roll forward. So during the next 10 years, built that business up, changed the brand into Outdoor Designs rather than Equip, spent 10 years building that up. And we've built up a really good business. During that period, we had stopped selling to other people, so we were just focused on our own brand. And then in 2003, we actually bought the RAB brand off RAB Carrington. And I think that was probably, of all the kind of stages, that was the biggest single change to the business at that point. And at that point, we had a sort of core business, the accessories, and actually RAB was actually smaller than the original core business that we had at that point. So Outdoor Designs was actually bigger than RAB. And so, it's a nice 3, and another bit of history is this building here we moved into Easter 93, Easter 2003, just before we bought RAB. So this building in an industrial estate in Alfred is also part of that journey and kind of where we are today. So roll forward. So then during that next 9 years, we built up the RAB brand. We opened up offices in Norway, US, Canada, and I spent that time building that up. And then in 2011, we bought Lowe Alpine. And so then that was a kind of next 10-year journey. And then, obviously, more recently, my change of role. So kind of nice blocks of roughly 10 years. So those are the milestones.
Okay, great, thank you. And I'm interested, why in the first place, why the outdoors industry? What was the pull for you?
Just like a lot of people in the trade, it was an interest and a sort of passion. It had started at school, doing scouts and then doing D&B, that kind of area. And I think it wasn't in it. I didn't wake up one day and go, I'm going to go and work in the outdoor industry. You kind of, it's one of these industries that you fall into. I mean, you do meet a few people who at school, they're going to be an instructor or whatever. But I think it's one of those things that a lot of people just get drawn into. It's not a conscious decision.
And they wake up 20 years later and they're still in the trade. And it's got this magnetic pull for a lot of people. And I was one of those people. And that now looking back I just would not know what else I'd do if it wasn't for this. And my only other job, I've had 2 jobs in my life, this one, and stacking shelves at a supermarket just after I left school. So, the draw's there and it still keeps me here today.
Probably a good choice then.
Yes, better than stacking shelves in a supermarket.
And I'm interested, so we'll dig a little bit on a couple of topics, but let's maybe focus on RAB for a little bit. So why RAB? What was the kind of appeal? Why did you feel like, okay, this is a brand that has opportunity?
It was a brand that, at that point, whilst it was relatively small, everyone knew of and everyone just admired and respected in the industry. And RAB Carrington had built the brand up over the roughly 20 years prior to that and had done an amazing job building a really solid reputation in the trade. And like a lot of people, my first sleeping bag, first proper sleeping bag to go out to the Alps with was a RAB sleeping bag. So I think it had touched and everyone knew, and it was a hugely respected brand. And so when I'd heard that RAB was contemplating retiring, the decision process was a millisecond, of course. Didn't actually think I could afford to buy it or he would actually sell it to me. But, when you're in your 30s and early 30s, you have this blinding confidence that everything can be done. And he said yes. And I'm still amazed to this day that he said he would sell it to us. Because, he had an amazing business. At the end of the day, it was his name on the product. So it was really important to him to make sure it was the right people. And I'm still, feel very privileged and honored that he sold it to us. It was a complete no-brainer.
I'm guessing in these situations when, you buy a brand that it's a little bit, once you start opening the box, you start realizing, what were the kind of, maybe some of the early challenges that you faced?
Yeah. RAB had always manufactured everything in Sheffield and had always kind of a little bit more, hadn't really sort of worked on forward planning and forward selling. So because, it was all down clothing, the factory was shut they shut the factory in, the summer, July and August. And then all the orders came in September and they then scrambled to make it all. So it was this vicious circle. So then retailers, what they did, they say, well, I know that RAB's only going to deliver half of my forward order, so I'll double my forward order. So the first thing we did, we bought the business, I think it was something like first few days of July. So I went into the factory and said, there's some good news, we're not shutting down for the summer. You're going to make and you're going to keep making. So we made, we had 2 extra months production and we delivered every single forward order. And having come from a sales background, the worst thing as a salesman is to write an order and not delivered, and you've been there. So we delivered it all. And I remember getting phone calls from retailers, and I can remember one particular, and said individual actually was in the building here this week, and it's like, well, what are you doing? You've delivered all the order. I said, well, you gave me an order, I delivered it. So we had done all our due diligence, and yeah, great. And there's an order book, and we can go out and deliver it, and it's going to be great. So next year, they didn't do that. They actually ordered what they wanted because they knew we were going to deliver. So the following year, it was tough. Yeah, we had built these plans and projections, and it was like, we hadn't completely appreciated the order book was slightly overinflated. So we had the second year was bloody tough. Yeah. But then at that point, then we did transition. We moved some of the production out of the UK into Asia. Controversial again, I know, but I mean, we were just struggling on margin. At that point, all the brands were starting to move, and so we'd started to then build a more flexible capacity and started to build it. And from that end of that second year, then we just grew, and the brand, apart from the COVID years, has continued to grow pretty much every year, year on year. Very quickly, it outgrew Outdoor Designs, and so we actually sold that brand off to our American distributor. So we ended up just focusing on the RAB side.
What do you think has been, I know it's always difficult to pinpoint one thing, but what do you think has been the success behind actually growing that brand? Because like you said, consistent growth over 20 plus years, more than 20 years now, on something where, okay, maybe there was a solid brand, but I'm guessing it was also very solid, really UK centric. And I think you've been able to grow now a lot of the international business. So
I mean, I don't know what the percentage was mixed, but it would have been 80, 90, 95% UK based. And now as a business, we're probably, I'm going to say only 40% in the UK. So 60 odd percent goes outside the UK. And that's taken a lot of time to do that. And I think the kind of, if you had to say one element, I mean, just trying to do one element is super hard because my brain's filling of like this, and this. But one element would be consistency of approach. So, we have a distribution policy that's wholesale first, and we've maintained that for 20 plus years. We've maintained the quality, we've maintained the brand position. So just that stability of everything, continuity of everything you do, a long-term view, and not kind of ducking and diving when challenges come along. And I think retailers, because we're wholesale, we are, they are ultimately our first kind of customer. They like that. We're dependable, we deliver on time, the brand's the same, we're not changing that. And I think that's what the trade has bought into. And, we do get challenged, in our strategy. Are we doing the right thing? And external people going like, well, you should be opening your own stores or driving a direct consumer model and all of those elements. But we keep doggedly to what we do and what we know best. And I think that has helped, and that essence is the same in any market. That consistency is super important. And when you go to export and go overseas, I think, you go in and these retailers take the States, for example, because we set up, or I moved to Colorado to set that up, is that, they come and they see lots of import brands. They come and go, and they don't have that longevity and that consistency. So you just being there, and it is time served. I mean, it's almost like not quite a jail sentence because it isn't that bad, but you've just got to be in a market for year after year before they'll take you seriously. And so it is that time. I mean, our Colorado sales office was set up 15 years ago. I moved out there with my family. So, it's been 15 years. And so we're doing really well in the States, for example, and that's now our biggest export market. Yeah, but we've been there 15 years and we've had our own office there for 15 years. We've been in Canada 17 years. We've been in Norway 17, 18 years. So it's all that level of consistency that, and a retailer or a consumer in those markets hasn't grown up, inverted commas, with the brand. So, you've got to do that. You know, RAB had been going in the UK for 20 years when we bought it. We've been going 17 years in the US. So those are the kind of, you know, it's that longevity, I think, that's important.
Yeah. Well, I think consistency is something that I would say comes up a lot. But it's funny, it's one of those things that's somehow quite obvious, but also incredibly difficult to do.
Yeah, because things change. Yeah. External factors, whatever they are, absolutely change. Be it, I mean, obviously the most recent one would be COVID, but there's been, you know, here in the UK, we had foot and mouth, if you remember those days, and lots of other challenges that come along. And trying to navigate through those in a consistent way is difficult. And it doesn't mean you have to doggedly do the same thing day in, day out. COVID taught us that, but it's retaining those consistent values in how you operate your business through that, and that's our kind of, I say people use the true north, but that those principles are what we stick to, and we apply those principles to the challenges that we see.
So you mentioned earlier on that you know outdoor sports has been a passion always, and it's clear that of course day to day it touches your life constantly. But outside of that professional environment, what role does kind of outdoor sports play in your life? If you can separate it, I know it's probably difficult to separate it.
Yeah, there was a period actually soon after we bought RAB where I actually didn't actually do that much, and deliberately I went within, I think it must have been within 6 months of having bought the brand. I was out with some friends climbing in the Alps, and we stayed in a hut. And when you said, what do you do? And then literally the next 3 days, that's all everyone wanted to talk about was outdoor clothing. And I just went, oh my God, I'm here to try to switch off. And as you say, can you actually switch off because you're immersed in it? No, but you can slightly turn down the volume a bit. So there was a period when actually I actually got turned off by it because I needed separation from it. And ironically, at that point, I took up sailing because it wasn't, you know, it is related. It's still outdoor and sports and stuff, but it's not related exactly to what we do. And I think that to me, that was my escape, and immersed in that for a few years. Probably now that I can kind of mentally separate things a bit better, I've got back more in, but getting older and the body and the joints don't work, so now kind of outdoor means kind of mountain biking, gravel riding and that kind of stuff a bit more. Also with the family, you don't feel that going climbing is the most responsible thing that you can do. I've done a few bits, and I know that the family, I've been to New Zealand a couple of years ago and stuff like that, and the family do go like, ooh, you know, you've got responsibility, and 250 people here depended on me in the direction as well. So you felt, you know, a wider family responsibility. So, but now, hopefully a bit more, but you know, hopefully a lot more time to do it.
Well, let's touch on that, because I know one of the reasons for you to step back from that CEO role to the executive chairman role, even though you're still going to maintain, I believe, some kind of responsibility around CSR and sourcing suppliers and North America development. But in addition to that, you're also the president of the EOG. And then, as you've well articulated, you have your family. So how do you find a good balance? Is there something that you have that's like a non-negotiable that you're like, okay, you know, we don't cross this line, or whatever it might be?
It is hard, and I do get, you know, when I lose some of that kind of downtime and recreation time, I get pretty grumpy, I must admit, and you know, something comes up and I can't do something that I wanted to do, that outside work, I mean, it does get pretty tough to do that. So, and I think during the building of the business, those kind of non-negotiables, probably that list became pretty small. And I think, you know, the change now is to try and rebalance that. So there are a few non-negotiables, and the biggest, I guess, the kind of one of the drivers to the change of role and the stepping down was, you know, I had an opportunity to go riding in Sri Lanka on a trip in January, and you know, I was offered that in kind of October time, and actually I went, oh no, I'm going to be too busy, I can't do it. And then just one day I went, this is it. This is crazy. That, I'm going to be in Asia anyway. I'm always in factories. So why can't I take out literally 6 days? And that was the point. It goes, when you're in your 50s, your life changes and you go like, okay, I need to do these things while I can. And I think that was one of 2 or 3 other little pressures that went, no, this has to change. I think there's a lot of people, I know in the industry and a lot of people I've worked with for a very long time. And, I might have said it, I'd obviously talked about it to people and said at some point, and they went, yeah, you'll never do it. And I think a lot of people, I kind of took great delight in proving them wrong. And that's probably one of my motivators in life. And I'm sure the other directors in business go like, yeah, he's talked about it, he'll never do it. And then very lucky that Richard spoke to Richard and he said yes. And also he said, oh, I'm going to be free after Christmas. And I went, oh my God, that's a bit quicker than I thought. So, so I've done it. And it actually takes me great delight, the fact I've done it. And that's motivated me a bit as well.
And the trip was good?
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, hot. And it was just amazing.
And you were touring? Or?
Yeah, just started out in just north of Colombo and just did a loop through in the southern half. So, yeah.
So I'm interested, why... as I just mentioned, you're kind of retaining some focus on some priorities for you. But why those? So why CSR? Why sourcing suppliers? And why North America?
I guess, I was very lucky. I could literally carve out my own role. And so those are the bits, as my wife jokes, this is anything to do with a long plane journey and you're all over it. So so someone said it's all the bits where that aren't close to home, and how's your family about this? But it's the bits. I mean, the North American market. I mean, that's a little bit easier. It's sitting here, we are based in the UK. Finding people who are based here who've got experience in that market is tough, and I do feel that part of, for better or worse, and my family did enjoy it, but we moved out there and made a great personal sacrifice, upended and we moved out when my oldest daughter was 3 months old, and we moved back when my youngest was 3 months old. So it was a really informative time to us, and the family put had a lot of stake in that. And I've built up and the market, and both in the US and Canada, been deeply involved in it and going back and forth for 17 odd years. So really I just always enjoyed it. And I feel part of me is still sitting in Colorado. So that's great. And then the factory side, I think setting up when we originally made our own, started making our own products and things, that really fascinated me. And I went to Asia in 93 and just really enjoyed getting involved in that, and some of the clothing lines that I had acted as an agent, I'd sort of got slightly involved in the production side. So just making stuff, and that fascinates me now, and so that still does that. And as a business, we put as a really key priority as our supply chain. So yes, any business is customer focused. We put as much emphasis on our suppliers and working with those key stakeholders in the business. And again, some of those factories, there's one factory who makes some of our gloves. We've worked with them since '94, and that relationship is absolutely core, and just making sure that is looked after and nurtured through. And I think that's part of that. And then the CSR is part of that touches the sourcing factory side, but it's a kind of recent passion that the business has had, and kind of growing awareness and I love, I feel that certainly on the supply chain, there's a lot of that CSR, what we can do, comes from where we make it, how we make it, and who we make it with. So those two are quite intertwined, I think.
Let's maybe go back to the other brand that you acquired. So, as you said, 2011 Lowe Alpine. So I guess it's a similar question. So why Lowe Alpine, and then what have been some of the challenges? Probably the why is maybe a little bit more evident for people, but still interesting to get your perspective.
It was, again, we talked about my first sleeping bag. My first sleeping bag went into my first backpack, which happened to be a Lowe Alpine backpack. So, I mean, straight away, it was just there. And, you know, you knew it was just part of the trade. And so, you know, when the opportunity came up, when it went into administration, there was an opportunity. And I went, oh my God, you know, cool, why wouldn't you? It's like one of those brands that has just been part of the industry for so long. And I remember being told, it was one of the guys at Polotech, and we were in Boston and over having dinner in Boston, and he said, "Oh, have you heard? You know, it's up. You know, it's gone into administration." And I think the joke said you should buy it, and I was like, "Okay, fine." And I literally probably went to the loo, got my phone out, and started trying to find who was acting for it and stuff like that. So it was just an instant. Of course you would. Why wouldn't you? So yeah. So it was very much just a gut reaction. Yeah, of course.
And what have been some of the challenges that you faced so far?
That was a tough acquisition in a way that RAB wasn't. I mean, with RAB, you were taking an amazing business and brand that had, I wouldn't say done nothing wrong. I guess pretty much done nothing wrong. Yes, it wasn't very big, but it was great and small and done nothing wrong. Solid foundations and amazing brand equity. And I see that kind of, people talk about brand equity and how do you articulate that? And I put brand equity, I kind of like it to a piggy bank, one of those old things we had as kids. And so RAB had been taking his loose change in his pocket every year and just putting it in that bank. And so he'd built that brand equity bank, and he literally, and this thing was full. Sometimes you can't buy that. Piggy banks are, ironically, they're probably not for sale, those brand equity banks, and he paid into it. So what that meant is that was bursting. And okay, I see that with that is that sometimes you can take a bit of that equity out. So, you know, we got flack when we moved production outside the UK. So we're taking a bit of that equity out, and we'd, you know, spend some of it. But every year you've got to make sure that you put more back in it than you take out. Lowe Alpine was very different. So it had been through ownership, through the Asolo ownership, and even when they bought it 10 odd years prior, it wasn't in a great shape. It was on the up. It had just started to dip, and I think, you know, they'd struggled a bit with it. They had moved a lot of the function out to Italy, and it was, you know. And I think with hindsight, they would have said, you know, designing clothing for Lake District fell walkers in northern Italy is going to be a tough gig. So it already started to wane at that point. And I think we hadn't appreciated how much the wane had happened. And you know, you said, you know, you make a lot of assumptions, and that's one we probably hadn't picked up on enough. So yeah, tough, much tougher gig. With it came, you know, a much bigger, more complicated business. You had offices in Kendal. We had an office, came part of the acquisition in Holland and Munich, which now are our two Equip RAB and Lowe Alpine offices. So it was a much bigger, more complicated business, and I think took a lot of time to get absorbed in. And I think we probably didn't act quick enough on that. So you've got a period of grace if you buy a business like that needs some changes. And we probably should have made some more tougher decisions, like the moving out of the core UK functions out of Kendal. We tried to keep that office going for a long time, thinking I'll be all right and we can run two offices. In the end, we realised we couldn't, and we should have just been more brutal, quicker. And I think, you know, my advice to anyone in that kind of situation is you're almost better off like a tree, prune it hard back, and then let it grow. Don't just try and snip a bit away each year. You just got to do it and make those changes.
Who are the people that have influenced you over your career, would you say?
I mean, it's 30 years, so there's quite a few of them. I mean, if you look sort of, again, we go chronological order. That first agency rep job I got with Dave Brown, selling Eagle Creek and DB Outdoor footwear. That's probably the most influential in terms of not you know, it was a relatively short period of my career, but got me going. And he I mean, you know, I was a 20-year-old. I'd was working in an outdoor shop. And I mean, why he said yes, God only knows. But he did. He saw something maybe in me, and he gave me that opportunity, and that started the career. Other people, so some of the lines I was selling early on, we did a brand that doesn't exist anymore called Scander Clothing. There's a guy there called David Hudson, who was the sales manager, and he taught me in a tough way the art of selling. And he was just an incredible guy and just taught me absolutely loads. Obviously, Rab Carrington back then. I would say that early on, those were probably in the first 10 years, the kind of three people that I learned a lot from. And then since then, there's been, everyone I've ever worked with, I've always gained a huge amount of knowledge and even today, already Richard's been in the business for it is a month now, and I've already learned loads, absolutely loads. So there's been, constantly everyone you work with, you just absorb their knowledge because they've all got different experiences. So, I probably worked with in this organization probably 400 or 500 people over the years. So, each of those you've learned a massive amount from and absolutely. And you continue to do so and you end up working, in a business of this size, people come and go and you do that all the time. And genuinely enjoyed working with pretty much everyone that's been in the business and it's that, and it's working with them and learning from them is just amazing. That's part of a good leader, but also just anyone in business. You got to absorb, and humans are great sponges, and we can just keep on absorbing.
In addition to your role here, you're also the president of the European Outdoor Group. What's the drive, the motivation for you to give up your time to do that role? I
still feel today, after 30 years, incredibly lucky to have had an amazing career in the outdoor industry, and built an amazing business and done really well from it. And so I do feel that we talk that brand equity, I feel that I've gained a lot and taken a lot out of the outdoor industry generally. So I see this as, and I know it sounds a bit smug and like, well, I want to give back. It is a genuine thing, that the industry won't keep going unless people do these kind of roles and do invest in it and putting back in for the good of the industry, because it's been amazing to me and given me an amazing opportunity. And, unless people will do these kind of roles, and there's loads of roles, there's EOCA and UK and Scandinavian outdoor groups. And so all of these kind of roles across the industry are super important that people do give the time. And I feel very lucky that I was both asked, but have that ability to put back in. And hopefully, you talked about that knowledge and advice is, I've been that sponge and absorbing for everyone else. And let's see if I can, wring a bit of that out and give it back to the industry. And trying to do that is super important, I think.
What's the European Outdoor Group's priority, and where do you kind of see its priority, its focus?
The industry, or the association has grown over the years. If you look at the number of people in the in the EOG as a secretariat, those that do the work, it's grown. One of the biggest challenges we face at the moment, and we're very open and honest about this, is that we had a very large part of our funding to enable us to do a great load of work for the industry came from a sharing of revenue at trade shows. Now, post-COVID, we've seen the trade show question really be raised, and we all know in North America that it's on real life support. It's tough in Europe. We are, attendance are down, both exhibitors and numbers. So that is hurting the EOG. So we are having to look at how we, from a financial perspective, de-risk our revenue away from that, and lots of new opportunities. So we can do that, but also how do we then, we could do it just by cutting all of the services we give, and the group is there to help, I think, primarily the small and medium-sized organizations to make that transition. So if you look at things like, a broad CSR, let's take a part of the whole kind of chemical compliance, it's really expensive and difficult for a brand to do that on their own. So being part of that and the EOG helping smaller brands and fund some of the work and do that to help those brands, nurture those brands, I think is super important. And yeah, instantly we could right size and de-risk it by just cutting those functions. But then what's the purpose of the organization? It's there to serve the members and the industry. And yes, we could do 20 times the work we do, but we have to focus on those core things. So we've always approached this of trying to keep what we do intact, and then how do we bring in other revenue sources? Yeah. That's one of the biggest challenges, a fiscal one. But then we talked about, I just mentioned about the CSR. I mean, that's such a huge opportunity and such a huge complicated area that actually the demand on the services, what the EOG needs to do is growing week by week. And so part of that is saying, we're going to do this, but we're not going to do that. Yeah. And that's really tough. At the same time, the industry seemingly is less engaged with EOG. If you look back when it was founded 20 odd years ago, it was very engaged by everyone in the industry. So those bigger brands weren't bigger then; they were a lot smaller, and the leadership of those brands was very much engaged in the industry. But brands have got bigger and they are seemingly less engaged, which is a worry because, we're there to serve the members. We need to make sure that the longevity is there. And so we do need that. We need that engagement, absolutely, because, what we'd all hate is to wake up one day and the market, it's fragmented and those new brands don't exist and there's no difficult to communicate to retailers and that just the industry will end up being fragmented and draw apart. And we want to make sure that it's cohesive and working together will actually benefit the industry. Yeah. We think of it as a big industry, but actually if you look at the outdoor industry and, various market data says 6 billion euros in Europe, you go and look at the kind of the car industry. What does that turn over? Or, even washing powder and detergent, that market, we're tiny and we need to stick together. We might think we're big, but we're tiny.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel, you touched on the complexity of the CSR topic, the sustainability topic. And I fear that if there's not an opportunity or a platform to collaborate within the industry, it's going to be really difficult, or even more difficult, rather, for us to address these topics which need to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of these topics, no brand is bigger enough to do on its own in the industry. It's just so difficult and so complicated. And you're right, the only way we can do it, and sometimes we look at each other and we look across a trade show hall and go, oh, there's my competitor. Actually, you should be looking across the trade show floor to someone's iPhone and go like, actually, electronics industry get their stuff together and they do these things. Yeah, and someone like Apple is big enough to change laws and regulations, but we're not. And that's really where the competition sits, not within ourselves.
What role do you think the EOG can play to foster that collaboration? Because I hadn't appreciated about the point around the seemingly drop off in engagement. Mm-hmm. So is there any initiatives or anything in mind with regards to kind of trying to bring that together and grow that collaboration?
Yeah, I hope so. We're lucky here in the UK. We're hosting the EOS summit in September in Cambridge, and you look at that and the EOS summits from 7-8 years ago. The last one in Sheffield in the UK were great, and there was a lot higher engagement in those. And I think COVID has, at the end of the day, COVID was the great disengagement. You sat at home, you were disengaged from everyone. And so it's trying to get that back is super important. And I think we have, as the EOG, we have got to try and work harder and target and talk to these people and say to the leadership of the industry, we need you there. You need to be there to make it work. And so, we have just got to try harder and make it happen and make sure that for example, the EOS Summit, the content is really relevant to them, they see value in it, then they'll go. Things like that. It is chicken and egg. If you know all the other leadership are there and, there are topics and things you need to talk about, if you know they're there, you'll go, but they won't be there unless you go. So it's that classic chicken and egg situation, very much like trade shows. If every other brand was there, every brand would be there. But as soon as some are not, they're not there.
I'm interested, when you look back now over the last 33 years, what would you say has been the best, but also the worst or the most challenging time over those 33 years?
It has to be COVID. It always feels like a trite answer to everything. And I remember would have been first lockdown here in the UK back end of March. And we were, and I think you were there as well, we were all at ISPO in February and we were all laughing at this and going like, okay, isn't it funny? And there was a supplier from Wuhan in China and everyone was going like, oh God, what do we do? And it was a little bit funny at that point. But then I remember kind of the first day of lockdown and sitting down and we saw our sales just evaporate. And it was literally, oh my God, what is going to happen? And, that was super tough. And normally we're quite a collaborative business and we're all here in the building. And of course you were sitting at home going like, what is going to happen? And as the CEO literally sitting in I was lucky I had an office at home, sitting there on my own going like, oh my God. And you felt cut off because, it was really before the advent of Zoom. And I remember going like, what's Zoom? But then very quickly, so that was probably one of the toughest times that I would say that was probably one of the most depressing weeks of my working.
But you already touched on a little bit earlier on that there was somehow some benefits from that. Yeah, so kind of looking back,
I remember just finish that. I remember then within 3-4 weeks and sitting, and I lived in an area at that time where it wasn't that busy with walkers and things, if you're the odd one. I remember looking out my window. Actually, it was where my kitchen was, and going like, my God, there's a lot of people walking. And then the penny dropped. And then that was like one of the most exciting periods. So you went from going like, oh my God, how do I mothball my business? To, oh my God, how do I benefit from this? And it went literally, I remember ringing up suppliers in December and January, December 19, January 20, going to suppliers, well, we know that you're in lockdown, but I need the stuff. Don't stop making. How can I get it? How can I get it? Faster, make it, ship it. And then suddenly in March going, actually, I don't want anything. Don't make anything. It's fine. And then ring up in April going like, I said don't make it. Now I mean make it. Make it faster. I need it now. And so that was like, and dealing with that adversity, actually, I find quite stimulating and exciting. And I think my kind of style has always been kind of, I'd say crisis management's a bit extreme, but, looking at problem solving and how we do it, that was the high and low of my career.
High and low. I was going to say,
high
I thought
and
it was
low
okay,
in 6 weeks.
Okay. I didn't expect it to be the high as well. But the
just that excitement going like, oh my God, this is an opportunity and how do we do it? I mean, it was also high because we were working from home and it was sunny and I could go biking more. But that's a different thing. Yeah.
You've mentioned in the past in other interviews that, getting through challenging periods like COVID and, as you mentioned earlier on, foot and mouth and the financial crisis, a key part of that has been the leadership team, and that kind of ability to navigate those challenging times. So when you're looking for leaders in your business, what do you look for?
I think one of our core and strengths has been that ability to deal with the unexpected. So we look for people who aren't kind of in a fixed mindset, in a fixed way. So they've got to be, entrepreneurial, innovative, able to think about things differently, not process driven. I mean, as a business, we're probably not very good at putting in core processes, being honest. So, what I don't want is, someone to go like, well, we've done it this way. We always do it this way. That's why we'll do it that way again. It's like, well, no, the world's changed, and we need to figure this out differently, and how can we do it better? So that's super important. And I think people who have worked, I think we work best and bring leadership in who've worked in small businesses where you have to do that. If you work for a massive corporation, there has to be more processes and you have to be more process driven. So I think if I look at the people that have really flourished here, those are the ones that have been that slightly entrepreneurial spirit, who've maybe come from a more varied background, smaller businesses.
Yeah. And I think that's arguably even more important now, because I think, okay, it was COVID, and then we had obviously the war starting and the supply chain changes, so that volatility is kind of
baked in.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we had a presentation about the future of AI, and again, that's challenge, opportunity, they're often the same two sides of the same coin. Same thing's going to happen, and how you embrace it and how you do these things is absolutely important.
As chairman of the business and majority owner of the business, what do you see as your most important role?
Where I see my role now and kind of the challenges and opportunity is being less involved in the day-to-day operational side of the business, excluding those couple of areas. So looking out and just thinking about things, I think, will be absolutely key, and having know the business, know the industry, being able to sort of think about things at a slightly less frantic pace, I think will be absolutely key. And then supporting the leadership team and getting them to think about these things. It's going to be a tough change because, I was directly managing them all up until 4 weeks ago. So trying to get that transition is going to be hard. Going back to the sort of previous block, I mean, as the CEO, it's very difficult because there's a lot of different styles. I think as the former CEO, I was very much involved in the detail here, which was both good and bad. So I kind of knew what was happening and understood things at a very detailed level. Probably lacked a little bit of that kind of step back and strategic area. Was always kind of get my sleeves rolled up and get stuck in. So I think, different businesses need different styles of leadership, and because the business has grown around me, and I know that sounds quite arrogant almost, but it has formed around me. So the business has adapted to that style of leadership, and now Rich is coming with a different style of leadership, and I do look now and seeing what's happening already, and going like, I should have been doing that, if I'm honest. And there's a few things like, ooh, yes, that's quite uncomfortable because I wasn't doing that, was I? So, and that's great because he's got a great set of experience. So, and I think, so it's very difficult to sort of leadership styles and challenges and everything else. It's because every business is like it's a entity in its own right, and how that operates and runs is very, very difficult. Making sure the match is there is the most critical. Making sure that it is not a square peg in a round hole or the other way around, I think is and trying to understand that leadership style and what's needed.
So let's imagine that actually you'd decided to completely cut the cord and you were going to retire, and let's say today was your last day here.
Yeah.
What would be your message to the team?
Thank you very much. Well done. Good luck for the future.
Perfect. Simple. Yep. To the point. What's your favorite piece of sports or outdoor gear? And it cannot be something from RAB or Lowe Alpine. That's way too easy.
That is really tough. What do I use the most that isn't our own products? I mean, I'm going to say a bike, but that's just too contrite. I mean, yeah. And the problem there is, obviously, my wife won't watch this podcast, so she doesn't know how many. So which one do I choose?
I had a similar discussion with Andrew Denton at this point.
Yeah. Quite difficult. because we do bike clothing, I can always claim they're for work anyway, so it's fine. It's an essential part.
Perfect.
Probably one of my bikes.
Okay.
I every time I get on it, which isn't enough because the weather's been rubbish this winter, it brings a smile. So if I said a bike of any type, brings a smile to me.
Okay, great. And is there a book that you would recommend somebody to read that is interested in leadership and specifically maybe within the sports and the outdoor industry, although that doesn't necessarily need to influence the book?
Oh my God, here's one of my secrets. I have a stack of books about business generally, leadership generally. Most of them are unread.
Most of them are?
Unread.
Really? Okay.
I was recently moved house, unpacking some bookshelves, and I went, oh my God, I've been given all of these and I haven't read them.
I guess then in a way, maybe is it that you're kind of developing yourself through all of the interactions that you have with all the people as you already discussed.
Yeah, I mean, I see them as they're my learnings.
Yeah.
That's where I learn and gain knowledge and insight for. And I think I'm just probably a bit more of a practical kind of person that, send me off on a course or a meeting that's why I absolutely passionately love, I hate to say it, trade shows. And it's not just about the business side, it's the connection and just talking to people. And, whether it's Olivero from Gravel, you learn something, just a little nugget you get from him. Oh, we've done this, or, completely non-competitive. And you just gain all of that. And I love just talking to, other contacts in the industry, some of them, completely unrelated, footwear brand and else. And you just gain from those people, and I love that. And I think that's probably, I guess they are my books. They are my reference point. And whether it's people you talk to who, completely unrelated, someone you meet at a, social event, something like that. Someone who, we moved house recently, as I said, and one of the guys, our new next door neighbours, been involved in the computer gaming industry for 20 years, and I won't mention who he is, but, very, very, very well known. It's and all sorts of stuff came out of that. Because oh my God, that's okay. You couldn't get more unrelated to the outdoor industry, but there's those nuggets of information. So never stop listening and talking to people.
Well, which brings me then nicely, I think, to the last question, which goes back a little bit to the one I asked earlier on. But if you could give future leaders within the industry 3 pieces of advice, what would that be?
Some of them are quite short and simple. So, things like hire the best people you can and listen to them. But then you go on to a much more detailed kind of thought process is, don't lose sight of your customer and who they are and what they are, and be true to that. So, trying to expect a customer to spend a huge amount of money on a product just because it's got an amazing piece of innovation, actually will the customer see the benefit of it? Does it benefit them? And sometimes I feel that in the industry we end up in an arms race to build these rarefied products that most consumers couldn't afford, don't need, or wouldn't know how to use. And I think here at Equip, we've always made, gear that is honest and true for real consumers. So, we like to think that we know our consumers and understand what they need. And I think that's super important. It's very difficult in a business that's wholesale focused because those end consumers are one step away. So it is harder for us. And this is where, if you are a direct consumer brand or a retailer, it's much easier because you can get to talk to those people on a daily basis. That's what you do. So I think that's important, definitely. And just to me, okay, yes, I own the business and have been the CEO, but it's the team. It's absolutely the team around you. And making sure that you have the right team, but also you enjoy working with them. And I think, that's the most important thing, is that's what, coming into the office, working with, a great bunch of people is so important. And a little bit of me has been, and there's people that we've had in the organisation that haven't fitted. Life's too short. If you're in an organisation where you don't feel that, don't hang on in there. Do something about it. But in the same way that if you feel that people aren't fitting into the business, it is. I mean, that sounds like I'm the worst boss ever, but life's too short. You've got to enjoy what you do, especially in this industry. And if you're not happy where you are, do something about it.
Perfect. I think that's a great place to finish. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please leave a comment below. A new episode will go live in 2 weeks, so subscribe to be sure you don't miss it. Thanks again for your support, and see you soon.